In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this really simple little coin purse. It's only made from a couple of pieces of fabric and they're folded. It really couldn't be simpler. You can include a little bit of a hand sewing if you want to. I'll explain that as we go. I've actually glued a lot of this together. It's really quick, but I think you'll find it really useful, not just for coins, but maybe for earbuds and things like that. Now, I've used a little bit of interfacing. I've used a G700 on the wrong side of my outer fabric, just to give it a little bit of firmness. I made one previously from a faux leather, which I found didn't need any interfacing. So if you're using a thicker fabric, maybe canvas or denim or even cork, then try it without the interfacing. But here's how we do it. What you're going to need is a piece of A4 paper and your two pieces of fabric to about the same size. But let's do the pattern first. So I'm going to fold this in half lengthways and crease the centre. Then I'm going to fold the two long sides to the centre and crease. Then we'll take the bottom and I'm just going to fold that up by about a third. So you can see this is going to be the shape of the bag and that's the flap as it goes over. So I'll crease here and I will give that a quick measure for you. Doesn't have to be exact, but mine is 4¼ inches, which is about 11 centimetres. And then I'm just going to fold what will be the flap over the top and crease here as well. Then open this all up and we're going to cut away the two top corners. The same on this side. Fold the whole thing in half again. And we're just going to round the corner of what will be the flap. So you can use a template if you like, but it's quite easy to just cut that into a curve. Now my magnetic snap that I'm going to fasten this with, I'm going to put that 1 inch or 2½ centimetres from the top. And to mark where this is going to go on the front, let's fold this back over again, fold down the flap and make another mark in the centre on the front of the purse. So now we'll need to cut two pieces of fabric from this shape, one from outer fabric and one from lining. And then I'm going to transfer those marks that were made for the clasp to the front of the lining on this part. So I'm literally going to make a hole in the paper and make a mark here. And then the second mark is going to go onto the outer fabric at the bottom down here. Quite difficult to see because I'm using blue on blue, but I can see where that mark is right there. Excuse me. Then we'll put the magnetic clasps on. So I'm just using 14mm, but you could use larger if those are what you have. The larger part is going to go on the outer fabric, so that's the side with the magnet in it. So where my mark is here, I'm going to put the back over the top and draw a little line each side. So I just couldn't see my pen. I'm going to pinch this and make a small snip each side of the center point there, and keep those snips as small as you can. Let's push that through, pop the back on squish open the legs. On this side, because it's a little bit thinner, I'm going to use a little scrap of fabric and just put that behind where the clasp is going to go, just to strengthen it a little bit. So I'm just going to hold that in place with some fabric glue. So that goes right behind the spot. And just like before, put the backing over the top, line each side, and snip. You could use your quick unpick if you prefer, just to make two very small incisions. Those prongs go through, the back goes on, and squish. So now we're going to put these two pieces right sides together. Just line up those edges. I'll put a few pins in here to hold it all in place. And then we're going to sew all around the edge, but we need to leave a turning gap in one side so we can turn it the right side out. So I'm going to leave my turning gap here. So I'm going to sew all the way around with 1/4 inch or a 6mm seam allowance. And that doesn't have to be exact. I tend to use the edge of my foot as the seam allowance, as long as it's consistent. It doesn't matter if it's slightly over or slightly under. So I'll take out my pins and I'm just going to snip into the corner bits here, so up to the stitches but not through them. And I'm also going to snip off the corners to cut down on the bulk when I turn this through. And I'm trimming the seam allowance just around the curves. If you have pinking shears, then you could use those. And then we'll turn this the right side out and give it a press. So I'm just going to use my turning tool to push out the curve here and into the four corners. And then we'll press it. So I'm not concerned at the moment about this turning gap being open, because when we sew the whole thing together, then that's going to be closed. I'm going to top stitch all the way around the edge in just a second, and that's going to sew the opening closed. So I'm just going to fold the edges of the opening inwards to make them neat. And then we'll top stitch all the way around. And just trim off those loose ends here, make it nice and neat. And now we can either glue this like I'm going to, because that's a really quick and simple way to do this, or you can hand sew. So basically what we're going to do is to fold these two side pieces to the center and sew them together. You wouldn't be able to do that on a sewing machine, but you could take your hand needle and thread and just do a very small over edge stitch. In fact, it might be easy to do it that way. Just catch the end of the thread and sew all the way down. But I'm going to do it the quick way. If you're going to glue, make sure you've got a really strong fabric glue. This is a Gutermann HT2, and it's one that I use, well, it's the only one that I use actually, but if I'm putting frames in bags, so to stick the fabric inside the frames, it's really strong. So I'm just gluing straight along the edge. Make sure you put the top on straight away because it tends to keep coming out. And then I'm going to bring those two edges together. And I'm just going to hold them there for a second while that dries. Make sure the glue doesn't go all the way through to the backing. We don't want to stick this to the back of the purse. So I'll just hold that for a couple of seconds. Then when this is dry, I'm going to take my glue again and just drizzle it straight across the center seam, about halfway down. Then we're going to fold this up and hold it. Now if you're hand sewing, obviously you won't be gluing that section, but you will need to put a few stitches just in the top here, just to make it extra secure. So I'm just going to catch all 4 points and do a few stitches just over the top. So backwards and forwards, right across the top of the seam, and that'll really make sure that the whole thing is held together. So just knot that off securely. And snip it. And that's my purse finished. So I think you'll agree that's a really quick and simple make. If it's something that you're making to sell, it just means you can make lots of them in a very small space of time. And it doesn't actually take up very much fabric either. So if you do have some scraps of fabric that you want to use up, then that is an ideal project for you. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. See you again soon.